Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're having a good week. I'm recording the lecture for the first half of the class. As discussed, we are going to divide the class in two. The first half will be these pre-recorded lectures, and the second half will be lab time to work together with me in class inside Zoom. So for this week, we're looking at week 2 over here in the course outline. I'm going to start talking about HTML. So you're going to learn about HTML. And you will also learn about Google Brackets. This is going to be more in the exercise portion in Zoom for the second half of the class. But first, I want you to learn about HTML so that you're ready for the Zoom to start coding. Sound exciting? Good. You're going to be coding later today. Don't forget, we have an assignment that will be due next week. So here, assignment 1. So we'll talk about that during the exercise time. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the textbook. I'm in chapter 1 of the textbook over here. Hopefully you've read this already, so it seems a little bit familiar to you, what I'm about to explain. We need to learn about HTML. HTML is the language for creating websites. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So you see the first letter of all these words, hypertext, HT, markup, M, language L. So HTML. What does this mean? Well, we'll get to know that soon. For now, hypertext, that's just text. Okay, hypertext, it's a fancy word for text. It means text that we're creating on the computer. That's what hypertext is. So HTML involves text, it involves markup. We're going to learn about markup later, and language. So just keep in mind that HTML is a language. So when we're creating websites, we have to learn the language. When we're creating websites, we have to learn the language used to create websites. And because it's a language, it has rules. Just like the English language has rules, HTML has its own set of rules. A web page. So we know what web pages are. We used many of them in our lives. You browse them on your phone, you might browse them on your computer. Let's get into a technical definition of what a web page is. It's a digital file that's written in the HTML language. That's the first half of the definition. So a web page is nothing more than a file that's been written with HTML. The second requirement is that it has a .html file extension. So we're going to be programming websites here. It's going to be helpful for us to understand a little bit more about how computer files work. So I'm going to just explain that a little bit. The computer consists of many different types of files. You might be familiar with some of them already, and I'm just going to give you a few examples from this Google search over here. So if you see files on your computer that have a .txt extension, you could know what kind of file it is because of its extension. This file extension tells the computer which software to load when you open the file. So you might have settings on your computer to open some kind of word processor or text processor when you double click a TXT file. But there are many different types of file formats. Audio file formats, you might be familiar with some of them. MP3, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with. So if you double click an MP3 file, that's going to open up, I don't know, if you have a Mac, your iTunes, or if you have a PC, whatever audio player you have. Um, I don't know, there's a huge list of all these files here. I'm going to try to find one that you'll be familiar with. How about these? Image files. Okay, so if you see something with a JPEG, you know it's an image file, or a GIF, you'll know it's an image file. And when you open these files, the computer will open whatever software you have set as the default to open image files. Any more? How about a Word document? Here we go. If we find other Word documents like doc or docx, the computer knows to open Microsoft Word. A PDF file, it knows to open a PDF file viewer, and so on. So the whole point of this is I just want you to become a little bit more familiar with computer files and their extensions, because it kind of simplifies the definition of what a web page is. Again, all it is a file that's written in HTML and has the .html file extension. So that's why in the instructions for installing the software, I had a little blurb saying HTML files can be created and edited with any text editor. So you can use any text editor for this course, technically. Because all you have to do is save a text file with a .html extension, and you've pretty much started the process of creating a website. The only thing that's important to build on top of that is that you need to write the contents of this file in HTML. So you can create a web page with any text editor, following the rules of HTML and saving that file as a .html file. But to help us out, we have all these text editors that are specialized for HTML, and the one I chose for this class was Google Brackets. As we start coding, you will see why Google Brackets is super helpful for us to help us write our HTML. Good, so that's the definition of a web page. Obviously, there is more to it. We have to understand what we can create with HTML to create all the stuff we see on the web, but for now, this is a good definition to get us started. And a website, another term I want you to think about. So the words web page and website are kind of used interchangeably. But for my course, I like to distinguish between them. So a web page I liked as the singular. It's like one page. But a website, I like using that term when I'm talking about a complete website, because a website could have many pages. To show you an example of this, I went over to Wikipedia. So wikipedia.org, it's a huge website. So I might be looking at one page in the website, but you can see that this website is a collection of many, many pages. And we could access different pages in the website by clicking on links. So if I click on a random article link, you'll see the address of this web page changed. Even though we're still in wikipedia.org, we went to a different page. Okay, so a website in my course will be used to talk about a collection of web pages that all reside at the same address. So Wikipedia could be an example of a website because it all falls under the Wikipedia address and there are many pages inside it. So this kind of simplifies things. It makes websites not seem like such a wild, difficult idea because all we have to do is create pages with HTML and save them someplace together so that they become a website. All that's left is learning what's involved in the HTML language to create the actual pages and all the fun stuff we see in websites today. So let's jump in and actually look at an example right away. So here we have a basic HTML example, and whoa, right? You're probably thinking, whoa, what's going on here? But we're going to break this down, and by the end of this class, you're going to look at this and just read it as if it was another language that you're able to speak. I've actually used some color coding to help you out, and you'll see this in Google Brackets, where they color code things, and it really helps to make your code more understandable. Don't get too lost in this. We're going to break it down a few ways, but have a look. So I'm going to do some highlighting now to help show you different parts of the code. You might notice a few things. You'll notice these angle brackets. So this is part of the HTML syntax. So it's part of the rules of the HTML language in order to write code. So we have these angle brackets that define these tags. So what I just clicked on is the HTML tag. So if I highlighted all this stuff here in the middle, you'll see that all this stuff is in between an HTML tag over here and an HTML tag over here. So this is the contents of the HTML tag. And then we kind of have this repeating pattern. If I highlight this stuff over here, I just highlighted the contents of the head tag. So you see over here we have a tag called head that starts, and we have another head tag over here marking the end of this tag. And what I just highlighted now again is the contents of the head tag. I'll do the same thing for the body. Over here, we have the contents of the body, right? The body tag starts over here and the body tag ends over here. Don't worry too much right now about what these tags do. I just want you to start seeing HTML code. And we're going to slowly, week by week, build up our knowledge, and this stuff will become very familiar to you. For now, let's call it the HTML sandwich. I like to use the analogy of a sandwich because we have all these delicious sandwiches of code that are working together. So right now I have the HTML sandwich, which is the top bun over here, the bottom bun over here, and the contents of the sandwich highlighted in the middle. So that's the HTML sandwich. And we're going to look at the structural tags needed in order to create a valid web page. And the cool thing is you don't need to memorize it because we have the ability with our text editors just to create the template for us. So what you need to do is just be able to understand what the tags are. Okay, so you don't need to memorize this. You just need to become familiar with what the tags do. And we'll talk more about this soon. Before we dissect all those structural tags inside the HTML sandwich, let's just talk about HTML itself. So HTML is a markup language. Okay, it's a markup language because it uses tags to describe content. So I started using that word already, tags. I talked about the HTML tag, the head tag, and the body tag. And these tags are used to describe content. So what I'm showing here in blue is the content. So title of the document, it's not an actual title, this is just a generic example, but here is where you would put the title of the document. So if I were to go to Wikipedia again, and you see in this tab, what's showing here is Wikipedia, okay? That's actually what's going on over here inside the title tag. So we're going to learn more about these tags, but it's just the first example of a tag. So whatever text I put in the opening and closing title tags will be placed over here in the web browser's tab. Okay? So that's just one example of how HTML tags, like the title tag, are describing content, like what's showing over here. It's telling the web browser, hey, this content over here is going to be the title of the web page. That's why we call it a markup language. Markup, imagine yourself taking a marker and writing all over a piece of paper to indicate what things are. That's what the tags do. We're marking up this content with tags to describe what the content is. Okay, so we insert these tags to surround specific parts of the text. And it's the HTML language that defines the set of possible tags, meaning we don't invent tags. HTML gives us the tags that we could use. Very similar to, a formal language like English. Right? We don't really invent words. Sure, you could argue there's slang and we invent our own words informally, but formally we have a set of tags. We have a set of words in the English language, and in the HTML language we have a set of tags. So we don't need to invent tags, we basically just need to learn what these tags are. So these tags define specific elements. So let's have a look over here. I already talked about the title tag. So this tag defines the title element. Here's another tag, the h1 tag. So this is a tag that defines a heading. We're going to look at this in more detail next week. We're going to use it this week, but just keep in mind, it's another example of a tag, and it's describing the content in between. So I have an H1 tag here surrounding the words my heading. This is telling the web browser that the text over here, my heading, should be displayed like a heading. Over here, the p tag, so we have a start p tag over here, and it's ending over here. So the content inside these p tags, which I just highlighted, hello world, this is telling the web browser, I want this text to be a paragraph. So that's how this HTML language is a markup language. We're using normal text and we're marking it up with tags to tell the web browser how to display this content. So with the H1, we're telling the web browser to create a heading, and with the P, we're telling the web browser to create a paragraph. HTML tags are semantic. It kind of means like the tag itself has meaning. So when you look at a tag, it should give you some kind of hints as to what the tag actually is. So H, it stands for heading. We're going to learn some other time why it's number 1. And P, well, it's short for paragraph. Title, well, it's title. It's the title of the page. So these tags are describing the content to the web browser so it knows how it gets displayed. I've been saying web browser a lot. Let's talk about web browsers. So what is a web browser? I'm actually using one right now, Google Chrome. So you might have heard of some others, Google Chrome, maybe Safari, which is created by Apple, or Firefox, which is created by Mozilla, or maybe Internet Explorer, which is created by Microsoft. So a web browser is software, and it's a software that's able to load HTML, to display HTML. Keep in mind Google right here is a search engine. This is not a web browser. So don't be confused with the word web browser. Yes, you're using a search engine like Google to browse, quote unquote, the internet, but you're really using it to search the internet. It's not a web browser. The web browser itself is Google Chrome. So I have Google Chrome over here. It's the circular icon, right? Safari, I also have on my computer somewhere. So you could use many different web browsers to browse the internet. The one I've chosen for this class is Google Chrome, and that's because it works well with Google brackets. Okay, so a web browser works by typing in the address of the website. So let's say I want to go to Wikipedia. I would type wikipedia.org, press enter, and it's thinking, and then it displays the web page. So that's what a web browser is. Okay, so a web browser is software that's able to read, understand, and display HTML files. So if you write your text file with the HTML language and save it with the HTML file extension, you can open it with a web browser and it will be able to display the HTML. So if we copied and pasted this code into a text file and we saved it with a .html file extension, we could then open it with Chrome, Safari, or Firefox, and it will display the content properly. We wouldn't see any of this, any of these tags. The tags would all disappear, and instead the web browser will display the content according to how we described it with the tags. So that's what a web browser is. It's the software that could open your HTML file and display it properly. So let's look a little bit more at these structural tags. We need to understand them a bit more closely when we start writing our code. And this is something that will be new to you for the next couple of weeks. But after that, it's going to be second nature, just to look at this and understand where you're supposed to put your code. So there were several structural tags. There is the doc type tag right at the top. There's the HTML tag. There is the head, and there is the body. So let's go back to our example. We have the doc type tag over here. It's the first line of code in any HTML file, and it describes what version of HTML you're using. You don't need to memorize it. You need to be familiar with it. You need to be able to recognize it, but you don't really need to do much more than that. The next one is the HTML file. I like calling it the HTML sandwich because it's the start of this sandwich here. You have the top bun of HTML and the bottom bun of the closing HTML, and all this juicy stuff inside the HTML sandwich. But this is a multi-layered sandwich, okay? This is a double-decker or triple-decker. Big sandwich, big appetite. You have the head tag over here as another layer of the sandwich. So you could imagine a second layer over here of the head, and then you have the body tag as a third layer over here. I don't know, it works for me thinking of them like sandwiches because you're going to need to learn where the start tag goes and where the end tag goes. And for me, visualizing it like a sandwich kind of helped me get through it. So what are the differences between those tags? Well, it's just kind of the rules that have been defined in HTML, and we just got to stick with them. The HTML tag is supposed to surround the entire content of your web page, and it has to come right after the doctype tag. So we have the doctype tag over here, and then the HTML content is next, and that needs to surround all the content in the page. And the content in your page needs to be divided into two parts, the head and the body. The analogy I like to use is like your body. How many heads do you have? One. How many bodies do you have? One. And where does the head go? Well, for most people, the head is on top of the body. So think of it like that in order to remember it. You have a head which sits on top of the body. So this is kind of a requirement to create a valid HTML document. You're going to have these four structural tags in place. The doctype tag, the HTML tag, the HTML tag surrounding everything, and then inside the HTML tag, you have the head and the body dividing up two parts of the page. If this all seems very overwhelming, don't worry about it because I have a template to give you. With the click of a button inside Google Brackets, you'll be able to create this template. And for the most part, you just really need to recognize that you're going to be putting all your code in the body. Okay? Inside the head of the page, we only put things that are descriptive, things that don't actually appear in the content of your website. For example, the title. We put the title tag in the head, we put what we want as the title of the page, and it appears in the web browser's toolbar at the top. But it doesn't actually appear anywhere in the content of the page. So for things that go in the content of the page, we use the body. This is where you're going to be coding 99.5% of the time for this stage of the course. All your code is going to go here in the body, and it's where you put things that you want to be displayed in the page. Okay, so we'll get through this with an exercise. You'll see it's pretty simple. It might be a bit new to some of you, to most of you, but you'll see that it's a pretty step-by-step thing to follow, just to take your code, put it in the body, and then you're good to go. Okay, so if you need a little reminder about what these tags are, you have it here in chapter 1, talking about what the doctype tag is, the HTML tag, and what I just talked about with the head and the body. So I've talked about this already. And for this week, we're simply going to look at these two tags over here to create our web page content. We have an H1 tag and we have a P tag. As I discussed before, it's to create a heading and it's to create a paragraph. And we'll get going with that this week, and you'll actually create your own first web page for real using these two tags. But first, let's talk about a couple more things. Tag syntax and whitespace. Tag syntax. Syntax. It's defining the rules that you need to follow in order to type your code. So HTML has syntax, and if you don't follow the syntax, you'll create what's called a syntax error. So I talked about those different tags. We had the head, the body, HTML, H1, and P. So I talked about 5 tags already, and what you'll see is that they all follow the same syntax, and that syntax is shown over here in black. I'm going to break it down for you. And this is quite important that you start seeing this. This is what we'll be practicing in the lab today, writing good HTML syntax with the H1 and the P tags. So let's break it down. This is the case for most tags. Most tags have a start tag and an end tag. So to create a tag, to make valid markup, remember markup? So if we want to take this content and mark it up with HTML, we need the start tag and we need the end tag. So the tag name, I've highlighted it in green. This is not a real example. This is a generic example to show you the syntax. You could take the rules from this example and apply it to any tag. Keep in mind that what I'm showing here in green is not real, but it is the place where you will put the tag name. Okay? So up here we had the H1 tag, that's the tag name for the heading. Over here we had the P tag, that's the tag name for the paragraph. So shown here in green is the tag name. And you can see that the tag name is surrounded by these angle brackets, which I'm showing you in red. Okay, so these are angled brackets. You'll find them on your keyboard next to the question mark. We'll look at that in the lab, don't worry. But these angled brackets are necessary to tell the web browser, hey, this is a tag. This is not content. Okay, so don't display this stuff in the page because this is actually the tag. I want you to display the stuff in the tags between the start and the end tags. Okay, so we have the tag name here, it's surrounded by these angled brackets. And the end tag is the same thing. Pretty much the same thing, except there's one little difference. Do you see the difference? It's the slash over here. Okay, so the slash is telling the web browser this is the end tag. You can see that in this example over here with the paragraph. So we have a start tag over here saying here's where the paragraph starts. And we have the end paragraph tag here with the slash telling the web browser this is the end of the paragraph. Following a syntax like this, the web browser knows to look in between the start and the end tags to understand what the content is that you're trying to display as a paragraph. These tags will disappear when you actually open your web page in a web browser. It's only the content inside the tags that will appear. So quick recap, keeping in mind we're going to code and practice this later. We have a start tag and an end tag that surround some kind of text content. We have these angled brackets surrounding the tag name in both the start and the end tag. And we have this slash over here to differentiate between the start and the end tag. All right. I have this example over here showing you how the HTML is a markup language. So the content here at the top, let me zoom in a little bit. The content here at the top is written in a more natural way. We have the title of the article, we have the author, we have a link, and then there's a paragraph. So this is what it might look like if you're just writing in a Word document or something like that, maybe in an email. Now, in an email, you might be able to get away with just writing text. Let's have a look. Um, Let me try to do this for you. So if I am writing inside a text editor, I'm easily able to change the format of the text with the click of a button. So if I wanted to make this word underline, I could just come up here to the interface and click the underline button, and it will add the underline for you. If I want to create a new paragraph, I could just press the enter button and then start typing. So that's what happens with the text editor. But with HTML, it doesn't work like that. With HTML, we're marking up this text with tags. So you can see in this example, if I were to format it with HTML, the title would be here with an H1 tag. The subtitle would be here inside H2 tags. This is an example for a link. And here's the paragraph surrounded by p tags. That's the first paragraph, and here's a second paragraph. Okay, so don't worry too much about all these different tags. For this week, we're just going to learn the H1 tag and the p tag. But I like showing this example because HTML is not a text editor like you have inside your email programs or inside Microsoft Word or something like that. Okay, you can't just click buttons to format the text. You need to use tags to format the text. And on that note, I'm going to talk about white space. So when you're writing in a normal text document, when you're writing in Microsoft Word or when you're writing an email, and you just want to format your text, you can very simply use one of the interface buttons like I just showed you. Or if you want to create a new paragraph, you can just press the enter button to create a new paragraph. Okay, but I'm going to show you in the lab today how that doesn't really work when you're writing HTML. So keep in mind that when you're writing your HTML, we have this thing called collapsing white space. Okay? Another word for it is truncated white space. I just decided I'm going to go over this in more detail during the lab. Okay, so that will be the end of the lecture for today, because in the lab we'll actually start to code these things. Okay, so hopefully this was a good introduction to these ideas. Don't get too worried right now about the complexity of the code that we're looking at. This will be broken down very simply during the labs. You'll have a template that you could use just to insert it in your page. You'll just need to recognize the different parts, and then I'm going to teach you how to code here inside the body. So that's the long and short of it, and I hope you're excited to get started. So I will see you in class today. As usual, like we decided, the first half of the class will be for these pre-recorded videos, and the second half of the class will be for the lab time inside Zoom together. So for my class, that means I'll see you inside Zoom at 2:45 p.m. Okay? So take the time you need to go over this video. Make sure you have the software installed from last week, and we will continue in the lab at 2:45 p.m.